Greetings, I'm Evan Swenson. I'm an author and a book publisher. I'm also the developer of Author Masterminds, sponsor of Readers and Writers Book Club. Welcome to Readers and Writers Book Club Facebook Live event. You're invited to come along with us as we visit with and become better acquainted with another amazing Author Mastermind author. Today we'll be talking with Author Masterminds author Valerie Winans, Dog's Best Friend. We'll be talking with Valerie about how she became a published author of 2 books and more to come, and how she came to be called Dog's Best Friend. We'll also talk with Valerie about her many trips from Michigan to Alaska and her time as host at Savage River Campground in Denali National Park, and how that developed into 2 books and resulted with her being in a recording studio, reading and recording her own book. Before we begin the talk with Valerie, here's this. We're going to have a couple of door prize drawings today as a reward for attending this Readers and Writers Book Club Facebook Live event. The first door prize drawing will be for a Readers and Writers Book Club t-shirt. The second door prize drawing will be for an Author Masterminds Mousepad 2020 calendar. You'll want to be here to learn more about Valerie and what it takes to become a published author, and what it's like to see your years of hard work and a bit of good luck turn into a book that sells at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and everywhere good books are sold. And don't forget about the door prizes. Now let's talk. Let's talk with Valerie. Greetings, Valerie. Welcome to Readers and Writers Book Club, sponsored. Hello, Valerie. Okay, let's get the first order of business out of the road. How bad did I mispronounce your name on that little opening?
You murdered it, Evan.
I practiced that yesterday over and over again. And for some reason, there's just some people's names that I just cannot get. I just can't make it.
Well, the name comes from the Dutch. My husband is Dutch. And originally it was Winans, W-Y-N-A-N-T-S, Winans. And then who knows, Ellis Island or whatever, it became Winans.
Winans. Yeah,
Winans.
Okay, Winans. I don't know why I can't get that, but I have a struggle with it. And I can tell you, experience tells me that it's not over. I'll still mess it up the next time. So Winans. No, perfect. That's not right.
No, that's right. That's perfect.
Winans. Okay. Winans. Okay. If I say that 100 times, write it on the board. Wonder if I could get that right. Winans. Okay. All right. Well, Valerie, again, thank you for being here. I guess so. The place to start was we referred to this in the beginning, but let's just kind of start there and talk a little bit about your trips to Alaska. You've made how many trips have you made from Michigan to Alaska?
7 altogether.
7 trips. Wow.
We've driven it 4 times, and we cruised it twice and flown. So
I guess that you have been there a few times. Well, let's look at this then. This is a picture of what you as a volunteer. You and your husband were volunteer hosts at what was it? The Savage River Campground.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And so, what does the host at a Savage River Campground do? I mean,
well, the main thing that a campground host in Denali does is make sure that all the campers have secured their food. Denali does not have the problem that some of the parks in the lower 48 have, because the bears in Denali do not look to the people for food or as food. So,
That's good. I like that.
So the campground host makes sure that the campers know where to lock their food up and how to be sure that nothing is left outside to attract any wildlife.
And you don't have then trouble with bears at all there? You surely have some trouble with bears. I would think
trouble,
so.
I don't think we really had trouble. We had a lot of bears at Savage River. They would come down from the mountain, from Mount Healy, and walk right through the park. And but they just never bothered anybody. They would not even look at you, keep right on walking. They were going to the river for some Eskimo potato roots or fish or whatever, and they were not the least bit interested in the people.
Well, let's talk about people. This is some people in Denali National Park, relaxing in the shadow of the mountain, I guess, Valerie?
Yes, indeed. That picture was taken at Riley Creek Campground, which is the biggest.
Oh, that's not the one you were at, a different one.
Well, we would start out there at the beginning of the season before Savage River opened. So the campground hosts would all be together, and teamwork makes the dream work. We would all be on the same page in terms of what needed to be done, and the experienced hosts helped train the new hosts, and we were quite a team in Denali.
So these people here then are not visitors, but they're fellow hosters, I guess.
Absolutely. They're fellow campground hosts. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, how many people were there hosts? Were just the two campgrounds, you and one other one?
Well, no. Actually, there was a host out at Wonder Lake that they took her out there at the beginning of the season, and she just stayed right there at Wonder Lake the whole time, because that's at the end of almost the end of the road at 90 miles out into the park. And they did have hosts also at Teklanika, and I think at Igloo, but at Savage River, there was my husband and myself and two other hosts, and then there were two sets of hosts at Riley Creek as well. And we worked 7 days on and 7 days off. And so it gave us a great opportunity to see so much of Alaska while we were there working as hosts.
Let's talk about some of the stuff that you saw at Alaska. Now, this is a picture of, you tell us what it is. I know what it is, and I don't want to steal your thunder on this one, Valerie. You tell us what this picture is.
This is the largest mountain on the North American continent. And it was called, the Indians or the native people there called it Denali to begin with. The Athabascans called it Denali. And then some guy came along and called it Mount McKinley because McKinley was running for president of the United States. And it stayed that way for so long because the people in Ohio would not let go of it. It had to stay McKinley. But, you know, the name really should have been Denali all along. The park changed its name to Denali long before they officially changed the mountain's name to Denali.
So the mountain is now Denali.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, all right. So that's official on the map. You can't find Mount McKinley on a current map, but Denali.
Absolutely.
Okay, now I'm going to challenge what you said, and then you're going to have to support your comment that you made. Okay. I know that Denali is the tallest mountain in North America, 20,320 feet. I know that for sure. Now, you said it's the biggest. Yeah. Now, what does that mean?
Well, I guess technically it's the tallest.
It's the tallest. Okay, the highest.
Yes, I think, well, isn't it Mauna Loa, or one of the volcanoes in Hawaii is actually, but that's not on the North American continent either.
No, it's not. No, it's not on the American continent. It's elsewhere, but not there. So I don't know, maybe one of our visitors could straighten us out. I'm going to just take a look over here, Valerie, for just a second. We got some people that, okay. This is the question, and this is a good one. Kim has been to Denali, I can tell. Kim asked this question: how often could you see the mountain?
Gosh, there was a worker at the original Savage camp that kept a record of how many days out of 300, or not 365, out of the season, how many days out of the season visitors could see McKinley. And it stayed pretty static over the seasons. And only about a third of the time can you see Mount McKinley during the season, during the traveling season.
Okay, I've been to Denali many times. I've flown past Denali, going to Fairbanks many times, and quite often we don't get to see the mountain. I'm going to put that slide back up, and because I want to make a comment on it. Well, I don't want to make the comment. I want to share a comment. So here we got Denali again, and we said it's the tallest mountain on North America. Gordon Parker is a Alaskan. He's been here before dirt, and he said
he was here
this
before Denali.
Before Denali, he was here watching it grow, I think. Okay, but Gordon says it's actually the tallest mountain in the world, rising from sea level. Everett starts way above sea level. And so the mountain is shorter, really shorter, even though it starts higher. So I knew that. And Gordon, thank you for reminding us. So we've got two facts, I think, right, Valerie? One is it's the tallest in North America, 20,320 feet. Let's get all of those in. And then the other thing is that it's the tallest in the world from its base, from the top, because you're looking right there, literally 20,000 feet of mountain. That's almost 5 miles of mountain that you're looking at, more than 4 miles high right there. So right. This is, people don't get the concept of what that is when you're thinking about how tall that is. So it is taller than Mount Everest from its base. Not a question about that.
Correct.
So we got those two facts. Valerie, do you want to defend the biggest one again, or are you going to give up on that?
Well, the mountain is the height it is because it's been pushed by tectonic plates. And so as those plates that caused the 64 earthquake in Alaska that did so much, those same plates are pushing. So I read an article, and I'm not going to say this is true, but it very well could be, that the mountain does grow a little bit each year, that it might grow inches each year.
Oh, really? Well, did you read that on the internet? If you did, I'm sure it's true.
Well, and I think it was on the internet, so it must be true.
Yeah, it must be true. Well, I know that the glaciers on Mount Denali are changing all the time.
Oh, yes.
Now, of course, the mountain is one thing up there, but when you get to Denali, everyone wants to see the animals. And you got to see the animals.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So tell us about this picture, Valerie.
Well, I have to say that the fall in Denali is just my favorite time. When we first got there, our first year, we were so green, we didn't even know what questions to ask. And of course, we're from northern Michigan, where the hardwoods are the big feature in the fall, because the hardwoods all turn beautiful colors, and people take trips just to see the color in the fall and so on. And I thought, well, there are no big trees, so that the fall must be boring because there'll be no color. Oh, contraire, mon frère. The color is just stupendous in Denali, as shown around that big bull moose.
So did you see a lot of moose there? Or is this just one of those, oh, there's a moose, we'll run out and see it? And
the moose, yes, we saw a lot of moose.
The answer to that question is yes.
In fact, one day as a campground host, I was walking in the morning with Remington Beagle, and we came around a corner and we were maybe 10 feet in front of a big cow moose. And we had training as campground hosts that moose will trample you. More people are hurt in the park by moose than anything else. And they will especially be riled up if there's a dog, because they look at all dogs as if they are wolves, and wolves eat their young and weak. So here I had Remington, and this moose's eyes rolling, looking at me, and I'm thinking, boy, we're done for. And I just kept pulling Remington back, and I was talking softly to the moose, thinking maybe I could get behind a tree, but then what about Remington? And all of a sudden, the moose darted the other way into the woods, and what a relief. But you know, Remington never made a sound. I think he was scared barkless.
Yeah, well,
he doesn't bark much anyway, but he never made a sound. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what saved us. If he had barked or made a sound, I'm sure that moose would have come after us.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Remington, because I think the folks at home may not know about Remington right now. Let's maybe hear. You had saw other animals in the park, Valerie.
Oh yes. One day, we would see lynx periodically in the park. Particularly my husband, Dave, saw them in the evening. He thought there were some lynx, and they had baby lynx. What are they, kittens, or are they?
I guess they're kittens. They're cats.
And so one day, Remington and I were taking a walk, and we're clipping along, and all of a sudden he just dove into the woods. And the rules were you had to keep your dog on the road, not on trails, not in the woods. You had to keep the dog away. And so I'm pulling him back. No, Remington, no. And he is just bent that he is going to go into the woods. And I looked, and the hair on his back was just standing straight up. And I thought, oh, wow, there must be something. And so I pulled him back, and I bent down and looked, and there was this lynx. Oh my goodness. I picked Remington up, and I ran back to the trailer, and I put Remington in the trailer, and I grabbed the camera, and I said, Dave, Remington found a lynx. I'm going to go take a picture. Want to come? And Dave said, in his wisdom, of course, yeah, that lynx is going to wait right there for you to get back for a picture. Well, of course, I got back to the place where the lynx was, and I just hate it when Dave always has to be right. And that lynx was gone. And I thought, oh no. And so I looked around and no lynx. I thought, oh boy, I'm going to have to go back and eat crow. And I happened to look on the opposite side of the road, and there was that lynx. Oh my gosh. I just took picture after picture, and that was the best one. But thanks to Remington Beagle, I got that lynx picture.
Okay. Hey, well, what we need to do right now, Valerie, is before we talk about Remington and tell the folks at home about Remington, we need to have a drawing. We promised folks that we would have a drawing as a reward for attending today. And the first thing we're going to have is a calendar mouse pad. I have it right here. This is neat as heck. It's so thin. I mean, you can hardly, could I get that to where you could just see how thin it is? It's really thin, but it's a calendar. And so it's only good for 1 year, but it feels tough, like it would last longer than that. So maybe after 2020, well, maybe you could keep it as a souvenir on your desk or whatever. But it's an Author Masterminds mouse pad, one in the world, by the way. So let's have a drawing. So if you would like a 2020 Author Masterminds calendar, why just send me an email. Send it like this. Send it to Evan, E-V-A-N, Evan at publicationconsultants.com. Evan, E-V-A-N, at publicationconsultants.com. And just put in that email, I would like to win the Author Masterminds 2020 calendar mousepad or something to the effect. And if you win, well, we will send you that one-of-a-kind mousepad for your use. Now, let's get one other thing up here. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, I did. I found it. Let's get it up. And so we'll talk about this too. Also, of course, we have the Readers and Writers Book Club t-shirt. So if you'd like to have a t-shirt for Readers and Writers, why, just send me an email to Evan at publicationconsultants.com and just say, I'd like to win a Readers and Writers Book Club t-shirt. Okay? All right. So some of the folks on Facebook Live are telling me, Valerie, that the live video feed is interrupted from time to time.
Oh.
And so we don't know how that works, except that it is. So if it is not really the way we want it, one of the things that we can do that makes it kind of exciting is that we don't have to put up with that, because after it's over, we can go back and fix it. And so we'll be sure and want to do that. Perfect. So those that are watching, let's be aware that bear with us. I don't know why that is. I haven't had that problem before, but we'll fix it so that it's just work. While I'm fixing some other things right here, Valerie, tell Kim this. Kim asks, and I know Kim must be acquainted with Denali, because she asked, how much of Denali Park did you actually see? So tell us, how big is Denali, and how much of it did you see? Did you ever get to go exploring, or was you just taking care, babysitting, as I would say, maybe babysitting and helping people, visitors to the camp that you as a host at Savage River?
Well, we saw a lot of the park along the park road. We didn't do much hiking other than, near the park road. And the Denali National Park and Preserve is huge. I had a visitor there tell me once he was there from Israel. And I always ask the guests, what brought you to Denali? And he said, I wanted my sons to see this park that is 10 times bigger than my country.
Oh my gosh.
Denali is huge, and it's wonderful because it's a preserve, but there are many along the park road. I always would advise visitors to go as far as they could. There is a wonderful place called Eielson Visitor Center, where you get a great view of the mountain, and it's a mile 66. It's a great place to go and see wildlife in the mountain. If you go further out to Wonder Lake, you can ride the shuttle bus or the tour bus all the way to Wonder Lake. That's the closest you're going to get to the mountain in Denali Park. You get a little bit different view, a little side view of the mountain, but a closer view of the mountain. Unfortunately, the only times we ever went to Wonder Lake, the mountain was shrouded, so we never got that close view. But one of our favorite places along the park road was the Savage River Trail. And it starts at the Savage River Bridge, and it goes 1 mile along the edge of the river. And there's a little wooden passenger bridge, pedestrian bridge. and then you come back the other mile up to the other end of the Savage River Bridge. And that's just a marvelous, marvelous little hike. If you want to go past the little pedestrian bridge, you can climb all the way up Mount Margaret.
So the visitors mostly along the road, though.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Valerie, let's see. Somebody asked. I can't see who it is. Asked, did you have any bear encounters at all? Was your time there as the host?
Well, my husband did.
Uh-huh.
My husband Dave was marking some trees that should be cut down because they were dangerous. They were dead and needed to be removed. And so they asked him to take his clipboard and mark on a map of the park the trees that should be removed. And so he was doing that. He was looking up, looking at this tree, and he heard a kind of a huff noise behind him. And he turned and looked, and there were two grizzlies about 15 feet away from him. And so he did, the extensive campground host training, kicks right in, and he lifted his clipboard high in the air and started talking to the bears, because they're supposed to be put off by the human voice because they don't hear it frequently. Well, these bears were not moving at all. They were sizing them up like,
Oh my
that
God.
looks like a good ham right there. Well, maybe we'll bite him there first. And so he hollered over to a family that he could see that they were grilling out, and they had little children out. And so he hollered, "Get in your vehicle, there's bears." And just then a park worker drove into the park in his Jeep. And of course the bears weren't going to tangle with the Jeep. And so they took off down the road. And so Dave said to the man in the Jeep, "Quick, drive to the end of the park. On the big site at the end of the park are some Boy Scouts, and they're probably cooking their supper too. So please alert the Boy Scouts that, there might be bear." Well, the Boy Scouts never saw the bear. The bears must have gone straight down the road to the river like they usually do. Probably disappointed because they weren't going to have any campground host for supper.
Well, I'm glad of that. Hey, Valerie, we've had a couple of people here ask about how did you decide then to write a book? So let's put this up, and we talk about Remington. You've said Remington. Now tell us who Remington is and all about it.
Well, Remington Beagle got full ownership of Dave and I beginning in 2007. And so when we went to Alaska for the first time in 2008, of course, he was an integral part of the team. And while we were gone on that trip, I wrote a blog so that I knew we would be in an area where we would not have cell phone connection. And I wrote the blog to stay in touch with everybody. We have 5 daughters and lots of family and friends. And so this was a way that we could quickly connect with everybody. But Remington, it was written in Remington's voice. Remington wrote and told
So
about
Remington wrote the book.
Yes.
Okay,
So
all right.
He told the stories about how silly Dave and Val were and the dumb things they did because they were so green. They didn't know what they were doing. And people liked it. And it got quite a following.
Did Remington talk about the lynx and the
Oh,
bears?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's in the book.
He takes full credit. Yes, indeed. So actually, when I wrote Alaska's Savage River, that was written as a nonfiction book, and it was not written, for the most part, there's a very small part, but for the most part, not written in Remington's voice. People that read that book that had been part of the blog said, "Oh, we're so disappointed. We thought it was going to be Remington." Well, and so that just pushed me to the second book, which was totally written by Remington and tells the full story about leaving Michigan and travels along the highway west and up through Canada, on the Alcan and all of our favorite places. Really, the driving the Alcan is half of the adventure. That's a wonderful, wonderful adventure.
So Remington was the second book. The Savage River book was the first book. Is that right?
Indeed. Yes, indeed. Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. So what's Alaska Savage River?
Well, when we were campground hosts there, we tried everything we could to find out information about Savage River Campground. We knew that was the first place that visitors were brought into the area, and we knew there was just so much history there, but we could not find much written about it. I read the administrative the book and the park about administrative history of the park. That's a real snoozer. I read Tom Walker's books. I read everything I could get my hands on, and it was usually only a paragraph or nothing comprehensive. And so I went on a mission to research and write a nonfiction book about Savage River Campground, and the original one and the current one, and meant for people that are interested in Alaska or planning on traveling there or whatever.
So this is a guide to just Savage River.
Savage River, right?
So it's not the whole Denali Park experience, just the Savage River.
Pretty much, yeah.
Really. So what's in your mind, Valerie? What is the most outstanding characteristic of the campground at Savage River?
Well, it is the first place on the park road where you can view the mountain. If the mountain is out, you can see it from Savage River. And the other thing is that there's just seems to be a lot of wildlife there. So you can camp right there at Savage River, see the Big Five and the mountain.
The Big Five. Yeah, okay. And the Big Six is the mountain. You can see the mountain.
Big Six is the mountain, right. Yeah. We had a lady that...
So you can see the mountin.
Right.
This isn't the view from Savage River.
No, you got to get a little closer to the mountain than Savage to see that. But
right, okay.
We had a lady that had camped in Savage River a couple of times and never seen the mountain. And she said to us, if you see the mountain out, you wake me up. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. I don't care when it is. I want to see the mountain. And so whenever we would do our rounds, no, the mountain wasn't out, not out, not out. The day after she left, there it came out, bright white against a blue sky. It was like, oh no, the poor lady just left.
Oh, no, that's the story of people's lives. I knew Kim was familiar with Denali and had been there. And Kim says, I loved Alaska Savage River. I enjoyed learning the history of the park that I never knew. Now, how could she learn the history of the park?
Well, that's a lot about what Alaska Savage River is about, really. And what is very interesting is to me the stories of the people of the past that made the very first campground there, and for 18 years operated between Jenny Creek and Savage River, this visitors camp. And the people then as compared to the people now. And the people pretty much want the same things. They want to see the mountain and they want to see wild animals. Now, Count Ilya Tolstoy had come and actually worked at that first Savage camp. And the people that worked there, Lena and Johnny Howard, met while they were working at the original Savage camp, got married, and continued to work there until they closed it. And then Amy and Mike O'Connor, who we met and knew, they were law enforcement rangers in the park. They met in the park. They married in our little amphitheater at Savage River. And so all those love stories of and Frances Erickson met her husband, Carl Anderson, and they were married. That one didn't work out so well. They parted ways after a while, but still, here are those love stories then and
Yeah.
now. It's just the connections were not coincidental. It's a wonderful place.
Valerie, I've never told you this, but I am going to tell you now. I camped at Savage River Campground the first time in 1958 with
Wow.
3 of our small children.
The current campground opened in 55, so it was
Really?
like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
new.
It was pretty well. There was really no campground. There was a little road that went by, and we camped underneath a big tree there. I guess the tree's probably bigger now.
Maybe so.
Yeah. Anyway, along with Kim, I loved the Denali, and I've been there several times.
Oh, it's magical. It really is.
Valerie, tell us about this picture. This is not Savage River Campground. This is what?
This is David Chown and Silvio Ciccone, and they are the gentlemen that helped me record both books, Alaska's Savage River and Road Trip with Remington. And they are currently finishing the editing of the books so that they can go on Audible. Silvio, he has done all of the legwork because I'm a technical train wreck. And so all I had to do was read the book. They're doing everything else in terms of meeting the requirements for ACX and sending it to ACX. I should tell people ACX is the sub company under Audible and Amazon that does the audiobooks.
So your book is going to be on Audible, ACX, and Amazon, and will also be on iBooks, on Apple, any Apple device. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So, Valerie, I know that you had an experience with reading Remington that wised you up as an author.
And
you know what I'm talking about?
I absolutely do.
Tell us about that.
Well, reading the book out loud was kind of an epiphany for me. I picked up on little nuances, places where, I could have made a better transition from paragraph to paragraph, and just little things that just reading it aloud, I thought, oh my gosh, I could have done so much better.
So
yeah. I'm working on a third book, and before it ever goes anywhere, I'm going to read that puppy out loud.
I think I heard you said that was a recommendation to all authors.
Absolutely.
Don't have your book published until you've read it out loud. Yeah. I have a comment here, Valerie, from DB Cooper. And DB writes, during my first trip in the park, visitors were allowed to drive to, he's calling it Moon Lake. When did that change? Also, I learned people lived in the park some distance past Moon Lake. Now, I think he's referring to, isn't it Mirror Lake?
I'm not.
What's the lake right at the end of the
Wonder
park?
Lake?
Wonder Lake. I think he's referring to Wonder Lake. That's really the lake in the park, isn't it not?
That's the only one that I was familiar with.
That's the lake. So Wonder Lake.
Several rivers, but the only lake I know about is called Wonder now, but I'm sure it,
I think that's what he's talking about. And
yes.
So do you know when that changed? When I went there in 1958 with my family, we drove all the way through and without a permit, without anything. We went and we camped right there at Wonder Lake the second night.
Yes. I'm not sure of the exact year, but what happened was as the roads opened so that people could drive from the contiguous 48 up to Alaska, and they knew that the number of tourists were going to increase exponentially, they had to do something to protect the wildlife in the park and at the same time make it accessible. And so they had this beautiful road. Well, I don't know how beautiful it was at the time. They've been making improvements to that road ever since they put it in. But what the federal government came up with was an actual law that said this many people, we determine, you know, the government knows the best. And the government determined that X number of people would be allowed into the park in order not to disturb the wildlife too much. And so they decided that the only way they were going to get all the people that wanted to go into the park there would be to put them on buses. So you could get, I don't know, 50 people on a bus or 60 people on a bus or whatever, and take those 60 out into the park. And that was one vehicle out and back. So they could get a lot more people out into the park that way. I can't, seems like it was in the 60s, but I can't tell you exactly what year it was that law went into effect. And then from that law that limited the number of vehicles that could go out into the park came the road lottery. And so the road lottery is at the end of the season, at the end of September, and people buy lottery tickets. And if they win the road lottery, they're allowed to drive out into the park as far as they wish, pending road conditions. Now, at that time of the year, it can snow in Denali, especially at some of the higher elevations. So, you know, if there's no snow and the road is good, you can go all the way out to Kantishna. But if it's snow or the roads are bad, they'll close them off at a destination closer in. That was probably way more than you wanted to know.
I don't know when it was, Valerie. D.B. Cooper corrected himself, says, yeah, that's right. It was Wonder Lake. Gordon, who's been here forever, as we talked about, Gordon says that he visited the park. There was no road. He had to go up on the Alaska Railroad, bridge washed out, and we wound up spending a week or so until it could be rebuilt. So he went up like we did, probably went across the Denali Highway into the park that we did in 1958.
Right.
And went there, and somewhere along the road, I know that where the bridge, just as it enters the park, you cross the bridge, and there's the sign at that time said McKinley National Park, not Denali.
Right.
And so we went there. Valerie, my late wife and I won the lottery one time. We went with our motor home, and we had a beautiful trip. In the end of that. And then recently, not too long ago, Lois and I won the lottery.
Oh, wonderful.
And we spent the time in there, and it is a great time. And we camped, and I'm not sure that it was Savage River because my mind might be wrong, but we camped, it seemed like it was closer into the park headquarters, but we parked in the snow. We camped in the snow. There was snow on the ground at that time. Valerie, let's say this has been fun, but before we go, I want to just have you tell us about this picture.
That is our sweet Remington Beagle. And he is definitely the alpha dog in our pack. Dave and I always try to do just exactly as he requests us to do. And he's just a very special part of our family. And when we camp, we always take Remington. And when we were campground hosts, he was a great conversation starter because we'd be around the campfire at night and Remington would be there. And who doesn't want to pet a cute little beagle?
Yeah. Okay. So he's the guy that wrote the book.
He's the guy right there. He's the famous one.
Okay, so then I obviously have a question about that.
Okay.
Valerie. So dogs are in human years. Dogs are how old compared to human?
I've heard that it's 7. So
7.
He's 13 actual calendar years.
Uh-huh.
So that would make him 92, 91.
91. Okay. And so he wrote the book. So is the book for senior citizens? Is the question. If this old dog wrote the book, what's it about?
I went to a book club to do a presentation, and it was Michigan, the Association of Michigan Teachers. And the teachers all said, oh, you should break that book into smaller stories and have all these children's books. And a good friend of mine said to me, it is a children's book. It's a children's book, and it's an adult book. It's a book for all ages. And I thought that was very good advice.
So there's a guy, a young person, not 91 years old, carrying Remington. So I guess maybe it is for kids.
I should tell you that the third grade class at Frankfort Elementary in Frankfort, Michigan, their teacher read them the book and marked on a map the places, as Remington told the story, marked the places where we were going into and around in Alaska to that third grade class. And Remington and I went and visited the class, and the kids just loved it. So yeah, it is a kid's book, but it's for any age.
But is it a book that teachers would read to the kids, or grandmas would read, or what's the age group that could read Remington?
Well, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure how the language, I never checked the language level. I really wrote it with adults in mind. But, children will come up to the level that if they're interested, they'll ask what that word means. And there isn't anything in it that any age can't read.
Okay. All right. Valerie, it has been really fun being here with you today and to get to know you a little bit better. Let's see if we've got some comments that we should look at before we go. And then I have one other thing I wanted to ask you. Okay, Carl Douglas writes, he says, my one and only effort to see Denali was in August. We traveled by train from Anchorage. That evening, August the 31st, was bright, and in the far distance, we could see the top of the mountain. We went to bed to rest up for the next day trip. We got to get some more here. It allowed us, it snowed somewhere between 4 and 5 feet. We were snowed in at the train station, then had to go through to Fairbanks and to Miss Denali. Everyone referred to the train that trip as the Fairbanks Creeper. I remember that, the Fairbanks Creeper.
Wow, that was an experience, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's Denali. That is Denali.
Absolutely.
So in closing and parting, I want to have you just give us your thoughts about Denali.
There was a bluff, or there is a bluff at the end of the campground, Savage River Campground, and it was enough away from the actual campsites that you felt very alone out on that bluff. And if the mountain was out, you could see it from there, but you were surrounded by mountains. There was Fang to the left, and as you were looking towards Denali, there would be Fang to the left and Mount Margaret to the right, and beautiful Denali straight ahead. And I was always just a little bit afraid out there, but every time I went out there, I could hear the song of a sparrow. And I kept looking, and I couldn't locate the sparrow. And finally one day, there was a little white-crowned sparrow singing a tune. And that bluff became my cathedral. And that little sparrow was my choir. And I thought, I'm in God's hands. I'm not afraid anymore. It was just a wonderful, prayerful, special place that even when I think about it, it's a spiritual thing.
Valerie, thank you. I think we need to end right there. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you.
And we will talk with you another time. But in the meantime, keep in touch.
Thank you.